Welcome to the lost paradise of the Jordan Valley. Prosperity here was unmatched until the fire fell. Today, only salt and silence remain of their pride.
Witness the catastrophic fall of the cities of plain.
Around the year 2000 before Christ, on a fertile plain beside the Dead Sea, there stood cities that the book of Genesis describes as prosperous, well-watered, and comparable to the garden of the Lord. Sodom and Gomorrah, together with Admah, Zeboim, and Zoar, formed what the biblical text calls the cities of the plain, a group of settlements that for generations flourished in one of the lowest regions on earth. Before fire fell from the sky, before salt covered the land and smoke rose like that of a furnace, these were living cities, inhabited by families, merchants, shepherds, and craftsmen who had no way of knowing that their days were numbered. In this video, I use modern artificial intelligence tools to bring historical paintings, ancient maps, and engravings to life, shifting perspectives, adjusting camera angles, and moving through these scenes in ways their original creators never imagined. The goal is not only to look at the past, but to step into it, to walk through these cities as they may have been, and to imagine what it would have felt like to stand there in their final days. And if you stay until the end, we will compare these same places with the landscape that exists today to see what time and destruction left behind. Before we enter the streets of Sodom, it is worth understanding how this story begins. The account in Genesis places Abraham and his nephew Lot traveling together through the land of Canaan, with flocks so large that the land could no longer sustain them both. When Abraham offers Lot the first choice of where to settle, Lot lifts up his eyes and sees the entire plain of the Jordan. What he sees is a valley well watered everywhere, green and fertile, compared to the garden of God and to the land of Egypt along the Nile. Lot chooses that plain for himself and moves eastward, settling among the cities of the valley and pitching his tent near Sodom. It is a decision based on what the eyes can see, on visible abundance, unaware that this very land would be wiped from the face of the earth. The region where these cities would have existed lies in what we now know as the Jordan Valley and along the shores of the Dead Sea, a strip of land that descends more than 400 meters below sea level, the lowest point on the Earth's surface. During the early Bronze Age, this area was not the dry, saline landscape we see today. Paleobotanical studies from nearby sites indicate that barley, wheat, grapes, figs, lentils, and flax were cultivated there, along with chickpeas, dates, and olives. Water flowed from perennial streams descending from the eastern highlands, and irrigation systems were used to sustain stable agriculture in an environment that, without human intervention, would have been too arid to support large populations. It was a land capable of feeding permanent communities, maintaining surpluses, and connecting trade routes with neighboring regions toward Mesopotamia and Egypt. The cities of the plain during the early Bronze Age were walled centers built with a combination of stone and mud brick. At archaeological sites in the region, defensive walls several meters thick have been found, along with watchtowers and city gates that point to a social organization capable of mobilizing large-scale labor. Homes were constructed with sun-dried mud bricks mixed with straw for reinforcement, a technique that required agricultural fields dedicated solely to producing that material for construction. It is estimated that for the fortifications of a single city, the equivalent of 1 square kilometer of arable land was needed just to produce the straw required. Streets connected residential quarters, storage areas, and spaces where commercial exchange took place. These were not scattered villages, but urban settlements with structure, hierarchy, and daily life revolving around trade, agriculture, and relations with other cities in the region. Imagine for a moment what it would have been like to walk through the gates of Sodom on an ordinary day. Genesis mentions that Lot was sitting at the city gate when the two angels arrived at evening. In the ancient world, city gates were not merely entry points, but places where commercial transactions were conducted, disputes were settled, and the elders of the community gathered. A man seated at the gate was someone of standing, someone involved in the civic life of the city. Beyond the gates, the streets would have been filled with merchants bringing goods from the highlands, shepherds returning with their flocks, women carrying ceramic jars toward water sources. Archaeological finds from contemporary sites reveal objects that reflect contact with Egypt and the Syrian region, including cylinder seals, jewelry, and ceramic forms that speak of a network of exchange extending far beyond the limits of the valley. It was a functioning city with its own rhythm, showing no outward sign that it was about to vanish. The biblical account describes the arrival of two divine messengers in Sodom at dusk. Lot receives them with hospitality, invites them into his house, and prepares food and unleavened bread. But before they could lie down, the men of the city, young and old, from every quarter surround the house, demanding that Lot bring out his visitors. The angels intervene, strike the attackers with blindness, and warn Lot that destruction is imminent. They ask if he has anyone else in the city, sons-in-law, sons, anyone belonging to him, because they must leave before it is too late. Lot attempts to warn his future sons-in-law, but they think he is joking. It is a detail that reveals something about human nature, the inability to take a warning seriously when everything around still appears normal. When the streets continue functioning and the walls still stand. When dawn arrives, the messengers urge Lot to take his wife and his two daughters and flee without delay and without looking back. The text says that Lot hesitates, that he lingers, and that the angels must take him by the hand, along with his family, and lead them out of the city because the mercy of the Lord was upon him. It is a moment that reveals something deeply human, the difficulty of abandoning everything one knows, even when staying means destruction. Once outside, the angels instruct him to flee to the mountains, but Lot responds that the mountains are too far away, that disaster will overtake him along the way. Instead, he asks for refuge in a small nearby city. The request is granted. The sun was rising over the land when Lot reached Zoar. Then the text of Genesis describes the moment that has echoed through the millennia. The Lord rained sulfur and fire upon Sodom and Gomorrah from heaven. He destroyed these cities and the entire plain, all the inhabitants and everything that grew on the ground. Abraham, who had risen early that morning and gone to the place where he had stood before the Lord, looked out toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the plain, and saw the smoke rising from the land like the smoke of a furnace. It is an image that needs no interpretation. The man who had tried to negotiate the salvation of these cities, asking God whether he would spare them for 50 righteous people, then 45, 40, 30, 20, down to 10, now stands on the heights watching smoke rise from the place where his nephew had lived, where real people had existed the day before. Lot's wife, whose name does not appear in the biblical text, though some Jewish traditions call her Edith, disobeyed the command not to look back and was turned into a pillar of salt. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus mentions her as a warning, "Remember Lot's wife." The Jewish historian Josephus claimed to have personally seen the pillar of salt. The early church fathers, Clement of Rome and Irenaeus, also testified to its existence. Whether interpreted as a supernatural event or as the memory of something preserved through generations of oral tradition, the image of a woman turned into salt while looking back at what she was leaving has become one of the most powerful symbols in the Bible. The Hebrew word used to describe her looking back carries the connotation of gazing intently, with longing, as if unable to detach from what she was losing. It represents attachment to what is already doomed. For more than a century, archaeologists have searched for the cities mentioned in Genesis. On the southeastern shore of the Dead Sea, The ruins of Bab Edra were discovered during an expedition led by William Albright in 1924. The site shows occupation during the early Bronze Age, with stone defensive walls, mud brick houses, and an extraordinary cemetery containing an estimated 20,000 tombs, where more than 500,000 people are believed to have been buried over several centuries. Burial methods evolved from underground shaft tombs to rectangular charnel houses built with mud bricks, where the deceased were laid to rest along with personal belongings, beads, textiles, pottery, and objects of stone and metal. About 13 kilometers to the south, the ruins of Gomorrah present similar evidence of an early Bronze Age city that was violently destroyed, with layers of ash and debris indicating fire and possible seismic activity. Some researchers have identified these two sites as possible candidates for Sodom and Gomorrah, noting that the 5 early Bronze Age cities discovered in the southeastern region of the Dead Sea correspond in number to the 5 cities of the plain mentioned in the Bible. At the northeastern end of the Dead Sea, another site has sparked intense debate over the past 2 decades. Tall El Hammam, a walled Bronze Age city covering approximately 36 hectares, was proposed as a candidate for biblical Sodom by archaeologist Stephen Collins, who argues that the site's location in the Jordan Valley matches the biblical description of Lot traveling east from Bethel to reach Sodom. The site shows evidence of sudden destruction around 1650 BC, with pottery melted on the outside, yet intact on the inside, and a destruction layer that includes unusual concentrations of salt. However, this identification is rejected by most mainstream archaeologists, and a study published in 2021 proposing that the destruction was caused by a cosmic explosion was formally retracted in 2025. What cannot be denied is that real communities existed in this region and were abruptly destroyed during the Bronze Age, and that their ruins remain as silent testimony to something that occurred here thousands of years ago. Beyond archaeology, there is something in the very geography of the region that seems to preserve the memory of what happened. The Dead Sea is nearly 10 times saltier than the open oceans. No fish can survive in its waters. The ancient Hebrews called it the Sea of Salt. Arab writers call it the Sea of Lot. The Crusaders called it the Sea of Satan. Salt accumulates in crystalline formations along its shores, creating a landscape that seems to belong to another world. Its therapeutic qualities attracted Herod the Great. Its minerals provided balms for Egyptian mummies and cosmetics for Cleopatra. Today, its health resorts treat psoriasis and arthritis, and its skincare products are marketed worldwide. Yet beneath that modern industry remains a landscape that seems to speak of destruction. At the southwestern end of the Dead Sea stands Mount Sodom, a geological formation composed almost entirely of halite or rock salt. It stretches approximately 11 kilometers in length and 2 in width, and its surface, more than 95% salt, allows no plant to grow. The result is a lunar white eroded landscape where wind and sporadic rain have carved columns, caves, and formations that appear like figures frozen in time. Beneath this mountain lies one of the longest natural salt caves in the world, extending more than 5.5 kilometers, filled with salt stalactites and vertical and horizontal chambers that take the breath away. On the surface, one particular salt pillar has for centuries been identified as Lot's wife, a formation rising about 20 meters above the landscape. On the opposite side of the Dead Sea, in Jordan, another similar formation is pointed out to tourists near the ruins of the Byzantine monastery of St. Lot. What makes this story different from other biblical destructions is the specificity of what came before. Genesis does not describe only the punishment, but devotes entire chapters to showing life before the catastrophe. We see Abraham negotiating with God, asking whether he would destroy the city if 50 righteous people were found there, then 45, 40, 30, 20, down to 10. And the answer is always the same: I will not destroy it. But not even 10 could be found. We see Lot offering hospitality to strangers, seated at the gate as part of the civic life of his adopted city. We see his sons-in-law laughing when he warns them that destruction is near, thinking he is joking. These details make the cities feel real, inhabited by people who had routines, relationships, plans for the next day, and no way of knowing that there would be no next day. The 5 cities of the plain, according to the biblical text, shared a common history. In Genesis chapter 14, Sodom and Gomorrah were part of an alliance of 5 kings who rebelled against Chedorlaomer of Elam, whom they had served for 12 years. In the battle that followed in the valley of Siddim, described as full of tar pits, the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fell, their cities were plundered, and Lot was taken captive. It was Abraham who marched with his men, pursued the invaders, and rescued his nephew, along with the stolen goods. After this rescue appears Melchizedek, king of Salem, who blesses Abraham. The cities were rebuilt after that attack. Life continued, and within a generation came the destruction from which there would be no return. At some point during that final night, while Lot and his family were being led almost by force out of the city, everything the inhabitants had built still stood. The stone and mud brick walls, the grain storehouses, the ceramic vessels in the kitchens, the looms with half-finished fabrics, the animals in their pens. None of it knew what would come with the sunrise. And when the fire fell, according to the account, it destroyed not only the structures, but everything that grew on the ground, erasing even the fertility that had drawn Lot to this plain in the first place, where once there had been a valley compared to the garden of God. Afterward, there remained only salt, ash, and a silence that would last for centuries. Archaeologists have documented that after the destruction of the early Bronze Age settlements in the southeastern region of the Dead Sea, there was a prolonged abandonment. The cities were not rebuilt. The people did not return. It is a pattern that aligns with the biblical description of a destruction so complete that the land itself became uninhabitable. Now I want to bring you to the present and show you what these places look like today. Thank you for being here, and if you have ideas or suggestions for future cities, share them in the comments. The plain that Lot saw as the garden of the Lord is today an arid valley where the Dead Sea continues to recede year after year, leaving behind thousands of sinkholes where fresh water dissolves underground salt deposits. The ruins of Bar-Bedrah remain as mounds of stone and earth on the eastern shore, visited mainly by archaeologists and a few pilgrims aware of their possible biblical connection. Artifacts found at the site are displayed in museums in Jordan, the United States, and the United Kingdom. Numaira, farther south, preserves the remains of a small city with clear signs of destruction by fire, a site briefly occupied and never resettled. Mount Sodom continues to rise slowly, a few millimeters each year, a mountain of pure salt that keeps reshaping itself under wind and rain. The pillar known as Lot's wife still stands there, a 20-meter formation photographed by visitors from the road that runs along the sea. And on the eastern shore, the sanctuary of St. Lot still stands beside the cave where, according to tradition, Lot and his daughters took refuge after everything they knew vanished in a single morning. I truly appreciate that you have made it this far. Your ideas, comments, and constructive suggestions are what shape what comes next. Feel free to leave a comment below. Until next time.